All right. What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Where I'm at right now, it's about 3:08 p.m., and today is December 24th, 2024. Merry Christmas to everybody, and soon to be a Happy New Year to all of you as well. It's been a very long, chaotic year, and I'm going to be going live more often. Like I said yesterday on my channel, just reading the news for about an hour or so every day, just to stay abreast of what is happening in the world and chop it up with the people. But as always, I got to tell everybody, go subscribe to Backpack Bandits, the content travel channel that I do with my wife. Also go and watch the movie reviews that I'm doing with her on this channel as well. You can also go check out the previous live streams of us reading books on this channel, me documenting my experiences going to university as well, and all the other cool things that we're trying to release on this channel to always grow and develop and just share experiences. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that. So jumping into the story, because we got quite a few stories that I want to read today. And the first one is about one of the most important people of 2024, a cultural icon, a person who has captured the zeitgeist. I would dare say the voice of a generation. I'm talking about the Tuah. Spit on that thing, girl. Apparently, she is a person who has captured the minds of a generation. She is Gen Z incarnate. She also speaks to the millennial mind and the Gen X soul and spirit. She has, somehow, went viral talking about sucking dick by covering it in phlegm from the back of her throat. And this is really America. This is our world. This is our world. You can become a celebrity. You can make millions of dollars. And you know what? I'm not mad at it. Because before I turned on this live stream, I was thinking about Too Short. Too Short, the rapper, made $1 million talking about pimping these hoes in the 90s. So if a man can, talk about his sexual exploits and cocktails, I guess Hawk Tuah girl can make $1 million as well. Anyway, the Hawk Tuah girl, I don't even know anything about her other than she spits on that thing. But recently she's been caught up in some BS. Hawk Tuah girl is casting herself as victim in crypto crash, lawyer says. So apparently this girl is out here doing crypto scams. And by the way, if you're a Bitcoin investor, it's been a very good few months or few weeks since Trump was elected. Bitcoin hit 100,000. I cashed out because I think it's going to crash again. I think once, a year from now, we'll see Bitcoin at about 50K or so. But yeah, it's been a good few months. And if you got in early on Bitcoin at around the 20,000, 25,000, even a 50,000, you doubled your money in these past few weeks. So shout out to all my Bitcoin investors. But we got no love for the crypto scammers. Anyway, let's read about what the Hawk Tuah girl is up to. This was published on Newsweek, and it was published on December 23rd, 2024. I don't know who it is written by. Anyway, Haley Welch, the Hawk Tuah girl, is trying to portray herself as a victim in the crash of a cryptocurrency she promoted, a former federal prosecutor said. Scott Armstrong was reacting to online comments by Welch, an internet personality, after the crash of the Hawk Tuah meme coin, which lost more than 95% of its value in a single day when it was launched on December 4th. Meme coin is a type of cryptocurrency that is typically launched on the back of a popular internet meme or recurring joke. So basically they're trying to say that the Hawk Tuah girl did a rug pull. Apparently there are people stupider than the Hawk Tuah girl who are willing to believe that she has the know-how, the wherewithal to be able to establish a cryptocurrency and that it will have some monetary value in the future. Our country is doomed. Our world is doomed. How are you going to invest in the Hawk Tuah coin? Anyway, Welch is not named as a defendant in the case, which was filed on December 19th in federal court in the Eastern District of New York. The investors are now suing the company Tuah the Moon Foundation. That is such a stupid name. Tuah the Moon Foundation. Hey, you think Bill Clinton would let the Hawk Tuah girl spit on that thing? I think Bill would like to meet the Hawk Tuah girl. I think the Hawk Tuah girl would like to do it to Bill too. Hey, Hawk Tuah spit on that thing. Well, I guess she wants to be close to the former leader of the free world. I don't know. I wasn't even born when he was in president, but I want to spit on that thing. I can see that happening. Anyway, The investors are now suing the company Tuah the Moon Foundation, which was used to take in the money received for the sale of the meme coin. The investors are also suing the company's chief financial backers, listed as Hong Kong-based Over Here Ltd, its chief executive Clinton So, and a Los Angeles-based online promoter, Alex Larson Schultz. Newsweek sought email comments on Monday from Welch, So, and Over Here Ltd. Why it matters. The case illustrates the volatile nature of meme coins. The sale of the Hawk Tuah coins also illustrates the power the internet has to lift people from obscurity to international stardom. Welch became famous as she was filmed by YouTube creators using the onomatopoeic phrase Hawk Tuah to describe a spitting action used in a sexual context. This is written for boomers. She's talking about spitting on a dick, getting that sloppy toppy. I think it would still be bad. I would not let the Hawk Tuah girl spit on my thing. Number one, she got no lips. She got no lips. She probably smells really, really bad. And she's hella dumb. She's hella dumb. Like, no, I would not let the Hawk Tuah girl spit on my thing. Anyway, yeah. She had since transformed her newfound fame into a successful merchandise line in the podcast Tuah Talk, where she has interviewed musician Wiz Khalifa and Shark Talk investor Mark Cuban. That's so crazy. You know, recently in the movie review that I did with my wife for The Substance, which you should all go check out. We posted it up last night. We had a very long discussion about fame, what fame does to the mind, and how fame is now something that normal people have access to, which was something that most people didn't have in history. Looking at how there are certain people that are famous now just for being famous or saying stupid things or doing stupid things. It's kind of a shame that, you know, people will remember the Tuah girl before they remember Nelson Mandela, right? That's what Acti said. And I think that's a bit of a shame, a tragedy and a travesty. Continuing here now. Welch promoted the meme coin and said that before she became involved, she believed that cryptocurrency was a scam, all right? So, Wellness Secret says, hey man, just want to say, I watched your video in Albania. I just want to say that no one was racist. Don't make a bad image of those. Were just the rules for everyone, not just you. Stop playing the victim card. Wellness Secret, I have to say, if you think it's okay to call black people the N-word, just say it in the chat. Until then, this is my response to you. I was called the N-word multiple times in Albania with the F word in front of it. So if you think it's okay for people to say N-words, go ahead and type that in the chat right now. Until then, Albania is the most racist country I have ever been to. And every time Wellness Secrets comments something, I'm going to say that again. Albania is by far the most anti-black country I've ever been to. And I'll say it again. Until you say N-words in the chat, Wellness Secrets, and you think that's okay, then I'm going to continue to say what I say. All right? Wellness Secrets is stupid as hell because he says, I didn't know that, bro. You are stupid as hell. You did not even watch the video. How are you going to comment something and you didn't even watch the video? This shows that a lot of Albanians are really stupid. Wellness Secrets is a stupid Albanian, and there are a lot of stupid people out there. Don't comment on my channel. Don't come and talk to me unless you watch a video from beginning to end. It's not that hard. You can put it on 2x and blow through it even faster. You are stupid as hell. Continuing here. So on December 20th, Welch reacted to the crash of the meme coin with several posts on social media. She posted on X, formerly Twitter, I take this situation extremely seriously and want to address my fans, the investors who have been infected, and the broader community. Strong, now an attorney with the New York-based McGovern Weems, told Newsweek that Welch is apparently trying to cooperate and trying to cast herself as the victim. The plaintiff's attorney, Wolf Proper LLP, and Berwick Law filed a complaint in which they claim that the defendant used Welch's celebrity status to create a speculative frenzy that caused the Hawk tokens market value to spike shortly after launch, reaching a significant market capitalization. So basically what they're trying to say is that there was a rug pull. They hyped up this coin, got a stupid girl who had a lot of celebrity who was hot at the moment to push up this coin. This company did. And then as soon as the market cap went as high as it could, as soon as the value of the coin went super high, they basically pulled the rug out from everybody, showing that there's a lot of stupid people in the world, as we see by Trump's election, as we see by Wellness Secrets comments, as we see by the fame of Hawk Tuah. There's just a lot of really dumb people out there, unfortunately, people that don't read. All right. Continuing here. The lawyers claim in a press statement that the token exhibits characteristics of an unregistered security and was offered and sold to the public without proper registration with the SEC. What people are saying. Welch posted on X, formerly Twitter, I am fully cooperating with and committed to assisting the legal team representing the individuals impacted, as well as to help uncover the truth, hold the responsible parties accountable, and resolve this matter. Armstrong told Newsweek, I've never seen anything like this before, so it's kind of uncharted territory, he said. Going now to the comments, Wellness Secret says, all right, chill, Unc, and then he put the skull emoji. Okay, Wellness Secrets, I gotta just let you know, don't say stupid stuff and you won't get aired out. And how am my Unc status? I know I'm 34, but come on now, don't hit me with the Unc now. I'm not that old, man. I'm not that old that you got to do me like that. You feel me? Anyway, continuing here. So Welch is seeking to avoid any lawsuits by siding with the plaintiff and has advised people who lost money to contact the plaintiff's lawyers. The defendants will have an opportunity to file a reply to the lawsuit and seek summary judgment in their favor. If that does not succeed, the case will move to pretrial motions and disclosure. All right, and that's the end of the Hawk Tuah situation. Listen, man, I wish her the best in whatever she does in life. All right. I hope that, she continues to go up and excel because, hey, it's better than, her being like struggling, working minimum wage or doing crime or something like that. So shout out to the Hot Tour girl. You know what I mean? I know I'm roasting you because how you got famous is stupid while I'm struggling on YouTube reading articles every day. But I don't suck dick. I can't make jokes about sucking dick. You feel me? Nelson Moreno says Simon is on that daddy status. Don't do me like that, Nelson. Shout out to my guy, Nelson Moreno. Anyway, let's talk about another person who is a favorite on this channel who I love to bring up, our guy, Dylann Roof. Does everybody remember who this is? This is the white supremacist terrorist who walked into a church and slaughtered 9 black people who invited him in to pray with him. Young teenage boy. No, he was like a young 20-year-old boy or so who did something horrific and threw his life away and crashed out for white supremacy. So he's on death row, I believe federal death row, and he's also charged in the state of South Carolina as well. Maybe they have him on death row. I'm more than certain we have the death penalty in South Carolina. Anyway, Joe Biden did a good thing. Joe Biden did a good thing. It says, Joe Biden not commuting Dylann Roof's death sentence sparks backlash. Now, I don't approve of the death penalty at all, except in the case of white supremacists. Except in the case of murderous white supremacists, they should be killed. And I'll stand on that. Every other crime, I don't care what crime you can think of, how heinous it might be, I do not believe in the death penalty. For the simple fact, I do not think a state, just like a state does not have the right to mandate people to die. And also there is a possibility that somebody innocent could die. So if there could be one innocent person who is murdered by the state, then the whole thing is wrong, right? Somebody could also make the argument about prison, right? There have been people that have been locked up in prison for multiple years, multiple decades, held their entire lives, and then we find out later that that person was innocent. There is an argument to be made there that prison should be abolished as well. I'm not going to delve too much into that, but I definitely think the death sentence is cruel and unusual punishment, which is forbidden in the U.S. Constitution. Except for white supremacists, we should have the cruelest, most unusual punishments for them, and the death sentence should be there as well. So this article was published on December 23rd, 2024, and let's read what it has to say. So President Joe Biden's decision to leave mass murderer Dylann Roof on federal death row while commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 men has sparked a backlash from death penalty opponents, including the daughter of one of Roof's victims. Now, this is the thing. Joe Biden is a white supremacist and a racist, old white man. We all know this. But white people generally are very, very allergic to, antagonistic to, blatant, open white supremacists like Dylann Roof. So even though Joe Biden hates black people, at his core level, just like Dylann Roof does, Dylann Roof wears it openly. Dylann Roof flies the Confederate flag. Dylann Roof talks about Rhodesia. Dylann Roof walks into the church and murders 9 black people that invited him to pray with him. Joe Biden hates black people too, but Joe Biden, one of the, sanitized white supremacists. They like to hide and mask their white supremacy and anti-blackness through policy, through measures, through obscure means. You get what I'm saying? So they like actually punishing the rednecks, the white folks that do the evil biddings or the most heinous parts or the most blatant parts of white supremacy. I believe also it's a type of class warfare because Joe Biden is a part of the, strata or caste in society that is higher, which is the whites in America. But they also are wealthy and privileged and powerful. So you get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You have a racist white boy who goes into a church and murders black people. Behind closed doors, white supremacists are very happy about that. I'm talking about the privileged white supremacists. And on top of that, you get to put the white trash out as well. You get a poor white man out of here, and on top of that, you get 9 black folks out of here, all for the price of 1. So, you know what I mean? I think that's why, partially at a meta level, that's why Joe Biden didn't want to pardon Dylann Roof, right? And on top of that, he's a Democrat, right? I mean, Trump would definitely pardon Dylann Roof, and there's a high possibility that he will if Dylann Roof is not executed. I think Trump will pardon Dylann Roof. I'm going to put that out there. That's on my 25 bingo card. Trump will pardon Dylann Roof, which would be low-key hilarious for all the black MAGA people out there. That would be hilarious. I think it actually will happen. In fact, I want to put that. I'm going to put that in the poll. I want to put that here. I'm going to make a poll because I want to know what y'all think. Will Trump commute Dylann Roof's death sentence? I want to know what y'all think. What do y'all think about that? All right. Anyway, I want to continue on in this story. So, Roof was condemned to death for the racist slayings of 9 black members of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. The Reverend Sharon Risher, whose mother Ethel Lee Lance and 2 cousins were among those killed by Roof, called Biden's decision unfair and urged him to finish the job, referring to his administration's 2021 moratorium on federal capital punishment by commuting the sentences of all the men on federal and military death row to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Which I agree with them in general. I agree with with all of those people. And by the way, it's amazing the level of compassion and forgiveness that black people have. The woman who is the daughter of 3 of the people who were killed at Mother Emanuel Church by Dylann Roof says that she forgives him. A black woman forgives Dylann Roof for murdering 3 of her family members. Does that not show that black people have God within us? Does that not show that we have a level of humanity that other people do not have? Because I've never heard a white man say this. I've never heard any group of people say this about forgiving their oppressors so much. We do, okay? Anyway, Nelson Moreno says, I don't care about Dylann Roof. I just want to sing Not Like Us and gatekeep the culture against other black people I don't like. Dylann Roof, I just want to meme about Diddy. I mean, that's the truth. Like, we're not focused on the bigger things. We just want to laugh and joke, kiki, ha-ha, and all that sort of stuff. Once again, free Diddy. I'm going to say this until they free him. For real, free Diddy. I hope actually Trump gets Diddy out. Because Trump got Lil Wayne out of jail. Maybe Trump can do something to save Diddy. If Trump does something to save Diddy, I will buy a MAGA hat. If Trump does something to save Diddy, I will buy a MAGA hat. That would actually be pretty interesting. I'd like to see that happen. Anyway, so you can't rank victims, Mr. President. Risher, who is board chair of Death Penalty Action, told Newsweek. I'm begging you to finish the job, not only with the 3 men left on federal death row, but also with those on military death row. There's still time. Finish the job. Newsweek contacted the White House for comments via email. I got to say this too. Biden is a Catholic, and I think he takes his Catholicism very seriously. And the Catholic Church is vehemently against the death penalty. And I think, Biden wants that to be a part of his legacy as well. Like he, followed his Catholic faith. He listened to his Pope, and he said, I'm not going to kill people, but he's also going to be like, certain exceptions need to be made, especially for the white supremacists, right? Which generally I agree with. I agree with as well. Continuing here. So why it matters. Biden's decision comes just weeks before President-elect Donald Trump, who oversaw an unprecedented number of federal executions in the final 6 months of his first term, returns to office on January 20th. The president had been facing pressure from advocacy groups, lawmakers, and religious leaders, including Pope Francis, to commute the sentences of those on federal death row before leaving office. The Biden administration announced a moratorium on federal capital punishment in 2021. Biden had pledged to end the federal death penalty while running for president in 2020, but death penalty opponents were disappointed when he did not take meaningful action to do so after taking office. All right. Nelson Moreno says, have you seen Conclave? No, I haven't seen Conclave. What is it, a film? If it's a film, let me know. We might be able to review it today, if not tomorrow. By the way, we're going to be getting on Ghost in the Shell. So Nelson Moreno, you have to let us know when you want us to review Ghost in the Shell, or when are you available to come to the Ghost in the Shell review on Fanbase. I've invited you to like 2 or 3 of our previous live streams, but you've never showed up. Continuing here. His re-election website did not make a similar pledge before he quit the race in July. So in a statement on Monday, Biden, the commutations are consistent with the moratorium my administration has imposed on federal executions in cases other than terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder. He went on, make no mistake, I condemn these murderers, grieve for the victims of their despicable acts, and ache for all the families who have suffered unimaginable and irreparable loss. But he added that he cannot stand back and let a new administration resume executions that I halted. Okay, so this is what I'm definitely seeing, Biden wanting this to be a part of his legacy, because he paused the death penalty in 2021 when he came into office, and now Trump is going to come into office, and Trump is known for killing people. What did they say? They said the Trump administration killed like 6 people. He saw federal executions in the final 6 months of his term. He oversaw an unprecedented number of federal executions in the final 6 months of his term. So basically, when Trump was in office, he was killing everybody on death row. You get what I'm saying? And that bothers me so much when people say, oh, Trump is a peaceful man, he loves Americans and stuff like that. He's straight up killing Americans. Straight up. All right. Nelson Moreno says, sorry, my family is all over the place. I can do it Friday. Hey, no problem, man. No problem. We'll do it on Friday. I'll send you the invite. Just come through. Anyway, this is a good thing that Biden, wants to stop the death penalty in the U.S. It's kind of sad that he wasn't able to, or didn't even try to pass a law that would ban the death penalty federally. But you know what? I'm glad he's making this last choice. You know what? Biden is going to go down generally as an okay president, in my opinion. He's just okay. Racist old white man. Like C. He gets a C. He gets a C in my book. All right. Anyway. Risher said in a statement to Newsweek, I am happy for all those whose sentences have been commuted and grateful to President Biden for this unprecedented act of mercy, but this is so unfair. I need the president to understand that when you put a killer on death row, you also put their victims' families in limbo with the false promise that we must wait until there is an execution before we can begin to heal. Every time this case comes up, I am brought back to the day my mother and cousins were murdered, and I need that to stop. Politics has gotten in the way of mercy. You can't rate victims, Mr. President, she said. I am begging you to the job, not only with the 3 men left on federal death row, but also with those on the military death row. There's still time. Finish the job. Abraham Bonowitz, the executive director of Death Penalty Action, said in a statement to Newsweek, every person left on federal and military death row is being handed over to Donald Trump for execution. Death Penalty Action opposes the death penalty in all cases because it is a failed public policy any way you look at it. The danger of leaving the death penalty as an available tool for Donald Trump to use cannot be overstated. Donald Trump idolizes dictators and relishes dictator-like power. We are absolutely grateful for what President Biden has done, but we urge him to finish the job. Do not give Trump the power to execute anyone. Paul O'Brien, executive director of Amnesty International, said in a statement provided to Newsweek that it was disappointing that the president did not commute the sentence of everyone on federal and military death row. I love Amnesty International, but Paul O'Brien, you can eat a whole penis. You can eat a whole penis, man. Let Dylann Roof die. We gotta kill Dylann Roof. Let Dylann Roof die, all right? So we urge President Biden to go further and commute all existing death sentences, O'Brien said. Martin Luther King Jr. III, human rights activist and son of Martin Luther King Jr., had urged Biden to commute the sentences of those on federal death row, said in a statement provided to Newsweek that Biden has done what no president before him was willing to do, take meaningful and lasting action, not just to acknowledge the death penalty's racist roots, but also to remedy its persistent unfairness. Donnie Olivero, a retired Ohio police officer whose partner was killed by one of the men whose death sentence was commuted, said in a statement provided to Newsweek that putting to death the person who killed my police partner and best friend would have brought me no peace. The president has done what is right here and what is consistent with the faith he and I share. Thank you, Mr. President. This is the thing. Biden, if he's going to be commuting death row sentences, also, let Assata come home. Pardon Assata Shakur. Pardon Assata Shakur, and free Mumia Abu-Jamal as well. So, continuing on in the story, Trump will not be able to execute the 37 men whose death sentences Biden has commuted, since clemency decisions cannot be reversed by a president's successor. As well as Roof, the two other excluded are Dzhokhar Zarnev, the man convicted over the 2013 Boston Marathon bomb, and Robert Bowers, who killed congregants at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018. Yeah, generally I agree with those. Yeah, so we only have Dylann Roof. We have Dylann Roof, Robert Bowers, a racist who went into a synagogue to kill Jewish people, and the Boston bomber on death row. That's fine with me. I'm okay with that. What about that young white boy that went into the Walmart and murdered all those Latino people a few years ago? Is he on federal death row? I want to know. Anyway, the three men left on federal death row now have applied appeals and legal challenges to their death sentences, which have to be resolved before an execution date can be set. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so that's the end of that article. Let me see what people thought about Trump. Nobody voted on this yet. This is a small live stream. Anyway, we're going to be reading the last article for today right here. It's this story that I thought was interesting about Afghanistan, and it's about something that I've talked about on my channel quite a lot. How the U.S. destabilizes other countries, make refugees in other countries, and then we're mad, or then we're upset, or then we're surprised that people are flooding into America. We have tons of Afghan refugees who have come to America because we totally destabilize their country. And some to make the smart aleck argument that, they should stay in their land and they should stay in their place and they should, try to rebuild their country. That's easy for us to say because we've never had a whole nation come and invade America, burn down cities, bomb out whole communities, and make it practically unlivable. It's easy for us to say that. From the comfort of our lazy boys and sofas in the U.S. But until we have that major military intervention where the rest of the world invades the U.S. and tries to reestablish democracy in some name or some fashion, how are we going to judge other people for what they're doing to be safe? Anyway, this is the story here. Behind Afghanistan's fall, U.S.-backed militias worse than the Taliban. Trump blamed Biden. Biden blamed the Afghan military. Our investigation found that the U.S. unwittingly laid the groundwork for the Taliban's victory long ago. So this is an interesting article. It's quite a long one, but I want to read it and react to it. This was written by Azam Ahmed. Azam Ahmed, a former Kabul bureau chief for the Times, returned to Afghanistan after the Taliban took control to report on the secrets the Americans left behind. He reported this story from Kunduz, Afghanistan. This was published on December 24th, 2024, today. So, the Taliban were inching closer, encroaching on land that had once seemed secure. The American officers warned. 4 of his men had just been killed, and he needed Afghans willing to fight back. Who will stand up? The officer implored a crowd of 150 Afghan elders. The people in Kunduz province were largely supportive of the Americans and opposed to the Taliban. But recruiting police officers was slow going, and by the summer of 2009, local officials and the Americans officer, a lieutenant colonel from the Georgia National Guard, landed on a risky approach, hiring private militias. A murmur of discontent passed through the crowd. "I don't think this is a good idea," an old man stood up and said, according to 4 people at the meeting. "We have seen this before. The militias will become a bigger problem with the Taliban." Over the grumbling, a one-time warlord named Mohammed Omar sprung up and denounced the others as cowards. "I will fight the Taliban," he shouted. The gathering in Kunduz in northern Afghanistan is not registered in any official history of the war, but people across the province say this seemingly unremarkable moment reshaped the conflict in ways that Washington has never truly understood. So basically what he's trying to say is that, when the U.S. was there in Afghanistan, they were in a place called Kunduz, which is in the north of Afghanistan right here, right? And they were, trying to recruit local Afghans to be in the police and form an army to fight against the Taliban, to make their country stable and democratic in the American model. And the people of Kunduz were not signing up to be officers. So some guy from Georgia, an American officer from Georgia said, well, why don't we just call the militias? And, this guy who was a warlord said, I'll fight the militias. Yeah, let's do it. So they called the militias in to fight the Taliban. And this isn't written down, but they're saying that this is, how a major part of the conflict. It's a major part of what led to where we are in Afghanistan. So for years, the Americans supported militias in the north to fight the Taliban, but the effort backfired. Those groups preyed on the populace with such cruelty that they turned a one-time stronghold of the United States into a bastion of the insurgents. People came to see the militias, and by extensions, the Americans, as a source of torment, not salvation. Interesting. Very interesting. Afghanistan is a beautiful country. They got beautiful trees, mountains, all sorts of stuff. The only problem is that they keep their women as slaves, and you can't smoke marijuana legally. I heard the best weed in the world comes from Afghanistan. That's why they call it Kush. It's near the Kush Mountains. Anyway, Mr. Omar, for example, who was known as the wall breaker, became the poster child of an abusive militia commander, marauding his way into local lore by robbing, kidnapping, and killing rivals and neighbors under the auspices of keeping them safe from the Taliban. So basically, once again, America does what it does best. In an effort to fight some enemy who's out there, who threatens our way of life or our military-industrial projects, we fund a warlord. We fund right-wing extremists who terrorize people of the nation that we are funding and trying to rebuild in our own image. A story as old as time. We never learn from our past. And he was just one of thousands of militia fighters unleashed in northern Afghanistan by the Americans and their allies, openly, covertly, and sometimes inadvertently. The consequences came to a head during the chaotic American withdrawal in 2021. The North was expected to be America's rear guard, a place where values like democracy and women's rights might have taken hold. Instead, it capitulated in a matter of days, the first region to fall to the Taliban. President-elect Donald J. Trump has blamed President Biden for the messy end to America's longest war, vowing to fire every single senior official responsible for the disastrous exit. Mr. Biden, by contrast, blames the Afghans for surrendering to the Taliban so quickly. Political leaders gave up and fled the country, Mr. Biden said after the withdrawal. The Afghan military collapsed. But both renderings miss a more fundamental reason for the rapid fall. In places like Kunduz, a New York Times investigation found the United States set the conditions for its defeat long before the Afghan soldiers laid down their arms. For years, the Americans helped recruit, train, and pay for lawless bands of militias that pitched homes and laid waste to entire communities. The militias tortured civilians, kidnapped for ransom, massacred dozens in vendetta killings, and razed entire villages, sowing more than a decade of hatred toward the Afghan government and its American allies. Once again, America continuing to fund and destabilize countries by having right-wing militias terrorize the people to fight some threat that's out there. In this case, it's no longer communists out there or left-wing insurgents. It's now the Islamists, the Taliban, the crazy radical Muslims who are out in the mountains of Afghanistan. So what does America do? We fund our own crazy radical Muslim Afghans to go and kill Afghani civilians, raping them, burning down their villages, all that sort of stuff. America continues to repeat its same cycle over and over again, destabilizing nations, and then we want to be mad that there are Afghan refugees in Kansas. It makes no sense. It absolutely makes no sense, bro. It makes no sense. I'm going to go eat at an Afghan restaurant today just because, I feel so bad about what my country has done to these people. I cannot even think of a country that has been fucked over more times than Afghanistan by Western powers. Like, Afghanistan is like the testing ground where white supremacy tests out how they're going to slaughter people, is how it looks like. Continuing here, the Afghan army, already overwhelmed, recognized that it was defending a government with vanishingly little support. So when the advancing Taliban offered Afghan soldiers a choice, their lives for their weapons, they laid down arms. The regions plundered by Mr. Omar and other warlords were active battlefields during the war, mostly off limits to outsiders. But more than 50 interviews conducted in Kunduz over 18 months showed how American support for the militias spelled disaster, not just in the province, but also across the rest of northern Afghanistan. That state-sponsored misery was central to how the United States and its Afghan partners lost the North, and how despite 2 decades and $2 trillion in American money, Afghanistan fell. What a waste pit. What a waste pit. This picture summarizes it all. This summarizes it all. This is our tax dollars at work. Billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, $2 trillion. We could have sent every American child to Harvard 3 times over with $2 trillion. We could have had universal health care. We could have had Gok 9000s for every single man in America, preventing the next incel from shooting up a school. And yet and still, we decided to waste it by just basically being imperialists in Afghanistan. Other Times investigations this year have revealed how the United States underwrote atrocities by Afghan forces and recklessly killed its own allies, essentially authoring its own defeat in Afghanistan. The fall of Kunduz in 2021 was the final word on another unforced American era, its use of criminals to carry out operations against the Taliban. The militias shot at civilians and killed innocents, said Rahim John, whose mother, father, and 2 brothers were killed by Mr. Omar, which other villagers confirmed. With no other choice, he said, we supported the Taliban because they fought the militias. Even the Taliban, normally eager to boast of battlefield exploits, credit their victory in the province to American missteps. The U.S. empowered bandits and murderers in the name of counterinsurgency, said Matiullah Rouhani, a former Taliban commander and the current Minister of Information Culture in Kunduz. But it only pushed more people into the hands of the Taliban. Human rights groups, academics, and journalists have published numerous accounts of atrocities by militias, but the extent of the abuse and how it helped enable the Taliban's swift takeover of Afghanistan is a story the Americans left behind when they abandoned the country 3 years ago. Today, with the militias gone, the scale of their acts in both human and political cost is visible. This story is so incredible. I'm gonna drop it in the live stream. I don't remember if I put it in the description of this video, but listen, man, y'all gotta read this. This is crazy. This is a crazy story. So today, with the militias gone, the scale of their acts in both human and political costs is visible. Previous accounts have blamed Afghan officials in the north for raising their own militias, but the Times found that the United States had recruited militias in Kunduz far earlier than was known, with a fallout far worse than American officials have acknowledged. So once again, why? Why do any of this? Why invade Afghanistan? Why torture its people? Why destabilize the region? Why fight against the Taliban? I thought we were all about sovereignty and let people run their nations how they want. Shit, the Taliban runs their nation like how the right wing wants America to be run. Let them have their rights to do it. So America just wanted to defend women's rights. Exactly, just like how Napoleon invaded Egypt to defend women's rights. So during its, America defended women's rights to get dicked down by American soldiers from Texas. Because everywhere American soldiers go, rape happens as well. During its 20-year war in Afghanistan, the United States pushed an ever-evolving series of programs to recruit, train, and support local resistance to the Taliban. Some formally created armed groups under the auspices of the police, while others' backing was ad hoc, with money and training provided here and there. In many cases, the Afghan government doled out American cash, giving militias the imprimatur of Washington support. Almost all of the efforts were problematic. Militias soon grew too powerful to disarm. And while they did fight the Taliban, they fought one another even more, creating the kind of civil war turmoil that first helped bring the Taliban to power in the 1990s. Some Afghans were so disgusted by the predatory militias that they began to see the Taliban as their defenders and joined the insurgency. All right, Nelson Moreno says, USA is going to help workers' rights when Trump takes Panama Canal. That's crazy. I might read about that tomorrow. If Trump takes if we invade Panama, I'm never going back to that side of the world again. I repeat, if we invade Panama, I will never go back to that side of the world again. That is insane. That's insane if he decides to do that. But it's also crazy that we continue to do the same thing over and over again. We empower right-wing fascists in Afghanistan, or in this case, just simple warlords who are no better than the Taliban because they're assaulting their people. And then the people say, well, shit, we might as well rock with the Taliban to defend us from you assholes who are funded by the US. One of the first militias was born in the Kunduz district of Kanabad, the brainchild of the Georgia National Guard officer desperate to beat back the Taliban. And one of the earliest efforts involved Mr. Omar, the wall breaker. There was no doubt in my mind that Mr. Omar was a leader in that community, said the now retired officer, Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Payne of the 2nd Battalion, 121st Infantry Regiment of Georgia's 48th Infantry Brigade Combat Team. Why did I read that? I feel so stupid reading that. And I firmly believe that at the time he was saying all the right things. By the way, Mr. Omar the wall breaker that is the most terrifying torturer that you will ever see in like a Saudi jail. Mr. Omar the wall breaker is here. Jesus Christ. Or Jesus Christ. Either one could happen. Mr. Omar the wall breaker. Anyway, Colonel Payne had not been sent to the north to recruit militias. He was there to mentor the police, but he had a wide remit and a big idea. He decided that activating Mr. Omar's group was worth the risk. It was almost like, if this works, if this is better for me, where I will get an advantage, then I will do it, he said. Instead, he wound up unwittingly supporting the only group in the region less popular than the Taliban, the wall breaker. The wall breaker. Look how intimidating that looks in bold New Times font. Months after the summer meeting, a Taliban fighter lay against the floor of a collapsed guest house. Outside, Mr. Omar, the newly minted militia leader, paced the street. "Come out now, or I will blow the walls of this house down," he shouted into a megaphone. As his men prepped mortars, witnesses said, "I am the wall breaker." The insurgent weathered round after round of mortars, each one collapsing nearby homes and terrifying residents with the indiscriminate explosions. So, Gouda and praying at right, a longtime Taliban fighter was pursued and targeted. Okay. Yeah, anyway. Mr. Wallbreaker is not playing. Mr. Omar the Wallbreaker, Mad Villainy says. Sounds like he's a beast, man. This is what I imagine Mr. Omar the Wallbreaker to look like. This is not a picture of him, but this is what I imagine the wall breaker to look like, man. That's insane. So anyway, finally, Mr. Omar retreated with his men, fearful that the Taliban might send reinforcements. But on the way out of town, for a good measure, his militia looted a local store and roughed up a few locals, residents said, actions that turned much of the community against him. Mr. Omar had waged an all-day battle, blasting his way through an entire village to chase down a single Taliban fighter, and still somehow his target had survived. So, Mr. Omar, the wall breaker, is pretty bad at actually killing people. He's good at breaking down walls because he's shooting mortars at Afghan villager houses and terrorizing the people just to chase one guy, but he can't even kill the one Taliban fighter he was chasing. Good at breaking down walls, really bad at killing people. Sounds like he was trained by the USA. Trained by the good old USA. That's made in America for you, baby. That's made in America. Mr. Omar, the wall breaker, can tear down walls but can't kill a single Taliban fighter. Nelson Moreno says they even got supervillain names. Anyway. But the wall breaker moniker struck. The name captured Mr. Omar's capacity for wanton violence, though not necessarily effectiveness. And that early foray was among the least offensive, many locals say. In another early mission in a neighboring district, he stole so brazenly and abused so widely that residents cited as the moment the entire area turned toward the Taliban. He even took people's dogs, one recalled. Mr. Omar, who had first taken up arms against the Russians decades before, used this renewed power to exact vengeance on his enemies from past wars and past decades. Akhtar Mohammed said that his father, uncle, and brother had been rounded up and summarily executed, ostensibly for attacking Mr. Omar's convoy with a roadside bomb. But Mr. Mohammed denied that his relatives were involved in the bombing, which he said was just pretext. The two families had feuded for 3 decades. Being part of a militia meant having the power and authority to settle scores, Mr. Mohammed said. So, I don't know. So this is Akhtar Mohammed right here. This is not the wall breaker. But this guy, was basically terrorized by Mr. Wallbreaker because, he just stood on the wrong side of him as well. Yeah, continuing here. Nelson Moreno says, Hamas was even hiding in the villages. All right. In Colonel Payne's estimation, things went very well for a while, but his deployment ended soon after Mr. Omar's militia began, and the area had a hard time after we left, he said. It really bothered me because I thought we had made a difference, he added. The United States knew about the debacle folding in Kunduz. A diplomatic cable from the U.S. Embassy in November 2009 emphasized the importance of controlling the militias. If left to their own devices, they could divide Afghan communities and spark additional violence, the cable noted. 2 months later, the embassy seemed to confirm those fears. The government had no power over the militias, which fought among themselves and forced locals to pay them illegal taxes. The cable mentioned Mr. Omar's role in the chaos, but blamed an overzealous Afghan governor for hiring him. The diplomat seemed unaware that the Americans had empowered Mr. Omar themselves. In 2013, 4 years after helping to arm the likes of the wall breaker in Kunduz, the United States left the North, handing control of security and the militias to the Afghan government. In the criminal free-for-all that blossomed, new commanders emerged even worse than Mr. Omar. They leveled villages and massacred families and fought one another over territory or perceived slights. So basically, the U.S. knows that this is probably going to be a bad thing. It's so crazy, right? This one country boy from Georgia becomes a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard, goes to Afghanistan, tries to recruit Afghans to become police, can't do it. So because he's from Georgia, because he's from the South, he thinks, well, let's just get the militias to do it. Shit, every day I went out in the woods with my uncle, my daddy, and all the other members of the the National Rifle Association, and we just shot guns and we're militia here to defend the people. Why not just do that in Afghanistan? This is what he decides to do. And the U.S. government finds out about this. They say, hey, this could lead to something really bad. And these militias, if left unchecked, might, really terrorize people. They fund this guy named Mr. Omar, the wall breaker, who's breaking down villages and shooting at random people, but can't seem to kill the Taliban. The militias start fighting themselves while the U.S. is there. And then when the U.S. leaves Afghanistan, all hell breaks out. And then we wonder why we have refugees in America, why they're flooding over borders into Europe and trying to reach safety. This level of barbarity, where your homes are reduced to places like this, is something that we cannot imagine in the West. People like to say, oh, if it was me living in Afghanistan, or if this happened in America, I would stand up and fight. I would stand up and fight. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Or you don't know what you would do because you haven't been in a situation that dire and horrific. All right. So, yeah. Okay. Nelson Moreno says, if we want women's rights, women will need to be packed and graped. They're against women's rights, so they're the bad boys. So what if the U.S. is killing kids? At least the U.S. respects women's rights. Yo, Nelson has like a big gripe about feminism. I love it. It's hilarious. But yeah, man, like it's so ridiculous. All the reasons why we said we needed to go into Afghanistan to bring democracy there for women's rights. We don't care about any of that because U.S. soldiers were over there getting down and dirty. U.S. soldiers were letting those Afghan military warlords have bocce boys, the little boys that they would routinely all gang rape. So, yeah, the U.S. doesn't care about any of that type of stuff. We destabilize countries and we fund this sort of crazy behavior that happens across the world. So continuing here. The Times spoke with dozens of families who had lost loved ones to those men and others, killings that tallied into the hundreds. Forced conscription was common, they said. Men were killed for refusing to join one militia or another. Charges of supporting the Taliban were leveled against those who refused to pay taxes, and many were jailed. The militias would label anyone they didn't like Taliban and then abuse them so much they had no choice but to join Taliban, said Mohammed Farid, a shopkeeper who said he was imprisoned for refusing to pay Mr. Omar a share of the proceeds from the sale of his store. The Americans did not direct the abuse, but they funded the government with billions of dollars in cash and weapons, with officials then used to hire and arm the militias. As far as the villagers were concerned, this was an American project, and the Taliban increasingly seemed like a better option. Shad Mohammed, a tailor by trade, said he endured more than a year of beatings and abuse before he finally sold his shop in 2013, moving his family to another district and joined the Taliban. For the next 6 years, he led a unit focused on fighting the militias in Kanabad. I went from living my life as a tailor to fighting on the front lines, he said. The Taliban take advantage. President Ashraf Ghani took office in Afghanistan in 2014 and realized the militias were running amok. With the Americans by his side, he loudly promised to bring security to Kunduz by bringing people like the wall breaker under control. The effort proved disastrous. Some militias, now maligned in public, soured on the government, former Afghan officials said. Some militias even switched sides, joining forces with the Taliban. Seizing the moment, Taliban commanders began secretly calling militia leaders, sowing distrust by telling them that the government viewed them as the enemy, according to Taliban officials and former Afghan officials with access to classified intercepts. They, like some others, spoke on condition of anonymity because they feared repercussions. The psychological tactic worked. Some militias stopped fighting for the government, while others kept clashing with one another, clearing the battlefield for the Taliban. The split between the militias was crucial for us, said Hesmatullah Zalmay, a Taliban commander in Kunduz. Within a year of Mr. Ghani's threat to curtail the militias, Kunduz was on the verge of collapse. So here's Ashraf Ghani right here with all of his homies, trying to maintain the paper tiger or the sand castle that was Afghanistan. Okay. Anyway, Nelson Moreno says USA was graping so they can improve the Afghan genetic material. I mean, the Afghans are pretty white. Afghans are more white than many white folks who think they're white. In Afghanistan, because of the Greeks that came there many years ago, the Bactrian Greeks. Afghanistan, you can find people with like green eyes, blonde hair, blue eyes, red hair. Yeah, of course you have dark-skinned people too. It's a mix of different people that are in Afghanistan, right? So yeah. Anyway, Mr. Ghani reversed the course. His government secretly funneled the wall breaker and others like him more than $100,000 a month to prevent the Taliban from taking over Kunduz city, the provincial capital, according to a former government official. It was too late. In August 2015, the Taliban stormed Kunduz city. Government forces and its militias fled until American airstrikes and special forces could help them retake the city. Far from drawing lessons from the failed militia strategies, the Afghan government doubled down to maintain order. Ghani's government turned to a man even more ruthless than the wall breaker, Haji Fateh. In a province shattered by ethnic and political divides, where factions of factions fought other factions, everyone agreed on one thing. Haji Fateh was the worst, most notoriously violent of all the militia commanders. Accounts of his medieval torture methods, branding people with hot metal rods, burying them alive, or keeping them chained in underground dungeons, still haunt the residents of Kunduz. Mr. Fateh was widely seen as a scourge, a villain who killed innocents and charged their families to retrieve the bodies. He was also an ally of the Afghan government and, by extension, their American backers. 2 former Afghan officials and several former militia commanders described years of government support for Mr. Fateh. He had a complicated relationship, said one former high-ranking government official in Kunduz. When the district came under attack, we gave him money and weapons to fight. The transfers were conducted in secret, he said, because Mr. Fateh was a wanted man. Before the Taliban emptied the prisons in Kunduz during their brief takeover, Mr. Fateh had been locked up for killing a police officer while robbing a Kabul bank truck. We supported him, yes, but it wasn't like he could come to the governor's house, the official said. So Nelson Moreno says, I think Elon Musk can fix the Middle East. He's very high IQ. Blacks for Trump. Unfortunately, yes, some people do think that way. How much the United States knew of the payments to Mr. Fateh is unclear. The money was given at a time when Afghan officials were under heavy pressure from Washington to take charge of their own security. The Pentagon did not respond to a list of questions about the militias. After fleeing prison, Mr. Fateh set down roots in the braided hillsides of DOESN, an area that was largely free of the Taliban. He operated from a torture castle, according to residents, and demanded ransom payments for his kidnapping victims, men like Haji Wazir, a contractor for the Americans, who said he was nearly starved to death by Mr. Fateh. Mr. Fateh's criminal empire was built on cruelty and swept up entire communities as he waged a brutal turf war with a rival militia. Dozens died in scorched earth battles between the two sides. Militias fired rockets and mortars into hillside villages and laced roads with bombs. They blamed the attacks on the Taliban, though they had no real presence there. Almost nobody in DOESN worried about the Taliban, residents said. To the contrary, they worried about the fight between the two ostensible American allies. Gul Afraz lived with her family in the village of Dana, a small community of Tajik families numbering fewer than 150 people. Wow. Okay, so here's another image here of these Taliban fighters. Taliban fighter in Dana, Kunduz, last year near a home adorned with colorful strips of clothes that are used by residents to denote where the blood has been spilled. The building was the site of a massacre of young men by militia gunmen. Interesting. So in Afghanistan, they put these colored these colored cloths on the walls to let people know that blood was spilled here, that there was a massacre here. And these guys, you know, the Taliban who are now in control are like patrolling the villages and stuff like that. Very, very sad stuff. Very sad stuff, man. Mr. Fateh, the U.S.-backed militia leader who is torturing people in a castle he owns, Mr. Fateh planted roadside bombs that killed her son and 2 of her nephews, she said. Fearing that the village might take revenge, Mr. Fateh bulldozed every home there, villagers said, sending survivors fleeing. Rival militiamen moved in, committing their own offenses, a tit-for-tat brutality that pushed more of the locals who were meant to support the one group that wasn't murdering them, the Taliban. Within a year of Mr. Fateh's arrival, the entire village had all but been wiped out. There was no Taliban here at first, Mr. Afraz said, but I am so grateful they are here now. Mr. Fateh operated with impunity, running checkpoints along the highway and extorting motorists of thousands of dollars a day, according to his former friends who remain in the region. Okay? Continuing, in a cynical twist, Mr. Fateh's abuses made him ever more essential to the government. The more he pushed people into the arms of the Taliban, the more the government needed him to fight them. The chief of police, the intelligence service, and the army showered him with money and munitions, according to the former government officials and militia commanders. Even the highly trained Afghan Special Operations Forces were supporting him. And because the Afghan government was particularly insolvent, it meant that the Americans were paying for all of it. We tried to capture him many times, said Sadat, a former special operations commander who, like many Afghans, goes by a single name, but then the government began to support him. Prosecutors in Khanabad issued more than 100 warrants for Mr. Fateh's arrest as complaints of robbery, extortion, and murder poured in, but the local authorities refused to act. One prosecutor gave his federal counterparts in the Ghani government 150 case files bearing evidence of Mr. Fateh's crimes, to no avail. Mr. Fateh was untouchable, and he knew it. So here's more scenes from Afghanistan. Man, I wonder what the fruit tastes like there. You think it would be even better? They got oranges? They grow oranges in Afghanistan? Okay. All right, you can get everything there. All right, anyway. Continuing here. One day in 2020, the Shiite owner of an ice cream store in Khanabad complained Mr. Fateh should stop stealing his ice cream. Mr. Fateh had the shop owner beaten in the street. In response, Haider Jafari, a local Shiite leader, said he had no choice but to confront him. Mr. Fateh responded by shooting him in the chest, wounding but not killing him. Mr. Fateh then burned Shiite homes in the town and ordered Mr. Jafari to flee. To reinforce his point, Mr. Fateh murdered his nephew, Mr. Jafari said. We went directly to the governor, and he could not do anything, Mr. Jafari said. We began to support the Taliban after that. So yeah, it's not surprising that the Taliban swooped in like heroes when the U.S. is funding literal, terrorists, terrorizing the people here. So we're going to continue. We're almost done with this article. American withdrawal in the fall of Kunduz. In February 2020, when the Trump administration reached a peace deal with the Taliban, the die was cast. The Americans were leaving. The Taliban went from district to district using elders to encourage the Afghan army to lay down its arms. It was not much of a negotiation. Thanks to the militias, the Taliban were stronger than ever, and there was no goodwill left for the government. By the time the United States announced its timetable for the withdrawal in 2021, the Taliban had all but taken most districts in Kunduz. Khanabad was different, in part because men like Mr. Fateh had Mr. Omar dug in. The Taliban and the government traded control of Khanabad 3 times during the second week of June. Mr. Biden met Mr. Ghani in Washington that month, insisting that the war's final act had not yet been written. Afghans are going to have to decide their future, Mr. Biden said. Mr. Fateh apparently did not share that optimism. Taliban officials say he tried to switch sides and even called a Taliban commander to offer his cooperation. But by then, the government was on its heels, and the Taliban saw no point in granting him quarter. The militias abandoned Khanabad for Kunduz city, taking residence in whatever areas they could find. Mr. Fateh positioned himself in a home near the eastern edge of the city. Mr. Omar emptied a madrasa of students and claimed it as his headquarters. Afghan commandos were dispatched to Kunduz, beat back the Taliban. They have the capacity, they have the forces, they have the equipment. The question is, will they do it? Mr. Biden said in July 2021, the likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything, and owning the country is highly unlikely. But the fight in Kunduz was over before it began. Even as commandos fought to defend the city, the Taliban were negotiating with the Afghan army to take over the province, Taliban officials said. Everyone saw the writing on the wall. Even residents who loathed the Taliban were tired of years of abuse at the hands of militias. The Afghan military was easily persuaded not to die for a lost cause, former Afghan officials said. In the end, the militias were the undoing of the government, said Abdul Rauf Chasari, a former police commander in Kunduz. I gotta say, the Taliban actually does some good things. Not abusing women, not, preventing them from getting education, but the Taliban actually does some good things. In this case, they fought the militias that were terrorizing the people in the country. The Taliban, as far as I know, also put an end to the rampant child sexual trafficking that happens in Afghanistan. All that bocce boy stuff ends under the Taliban. They don't tolerate any of that. So that's a good thing. Do I have other criticisms of the Taliban? Yes, they're authoritarian, they're right-wing, they're theocratic. It's not a good form of government, but you can at least applaud some good things, like getting rid of these terrorists that were funded by the U.S. terrorizing the civilian population. All right. Nelson Moreno says, I wonder if you can find Afghan corn on X videos. Of course you can. Of course you can find Afghan corn getting BBC'd up. Anyway, some of the most notorious warlords and criminals who brought such misery to Kunduz and ultimately did more to support the Taliban than defeat them faded away without a final battle or trial. Mr. Omar, the wall breaker, died of natural causes not long after the Taliban took over. Haji Fateh fled to safety as the province fell and resettled in Iran, where he lives in a swanky home paid for by the money he earned, brutalizing the people of Kunduz, according to one of his friends. Mr. Fateh could not be reached for comment, but he welcomes visitors regularly for lavish meals or tea, said the friends, speaking on condition of anonymity out of fear of incurring his wrath. Among his most frequent guests, the friend said, are former Afghan government officials hoping to convince him once more to take up arms on their behalf. So even now, Afghan leaders who are part of the old administration are trying to talk to the old warlords who terrorize the Afghan people to come back and fight for them so they can retake the country. Anyway, this was an amazing article from Azam Ahmed. And yeah, man, what we did to Afghanistan is horrific. What we've done to the Middle East as Americans is horrific. And see, Nelson Moreno, don't they have really white people. That is the whitest man I've ever seen. He's one of the whitest men I've ever seen in Afghanistan. Anyway, so yeah, that was a very interesting story. Very, very good read, I would say. And yeah, y'all should go check it out. I'm going to put the links to all of these stories in the comments if I haven't. But shout out to everybody who came into the comments. We have Wellness Secrets, Nelson Moreno, and Mad Villainy. Y'all be easy out there. If you have a story you want me to react to, put it in the comments. And peace.